Hello, everybody. I'm Toby Shifsky, Vice President of Kaplan Real Estate Education, and we're here for our Real Expert webinar with none other than Chuck Wachendorfer. Chuck, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Toby, for having me. It's a pleasure to be with everybody today. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, our entire webinar today is really about, achieving purposeful goals, overcoming fear, which we all have, and setting your goals. And Chuck is our expert. And let me give you a little background on why Chuck is here today. Not only is he a Detroit Red Wings fan, but Chuck has over 25 years of experience helping executives and business owners achieve peak performance and efficiency. His work varies, right? His work spans various industries, including financial services, real estate, technology, and healthcare. Specializes in leadership development, team cohesion, and growth strategies. Co-author of Don't Wait for Someone Else to Fix It. Chuck is also an accomplished author. His insights have been featured in Forbes, CNN Money, Investors Business Daily, and various TED Talk shows. And I can tell you his TED Talk shows are worth a watch. I've watched them. And Ted lives in Denver, Colorado, enjoys traveling, skiing, biking, and reading in his free time. Ted, thank you for being here.
Chuck, you mean? You're getting your names confused. I did do a couple of TED Talks. One was released in February, actually on our topic that we're talking about today, which is about achieving goals. So it'd be great to watch his follow-up to our conversation today.
Excellent, excellent. So, and just to kind of round this off, Chuck is talking to us. And today, Chuck, we have a bunch of would-be real estate experts, yep, and we have some real estate experts. And just so everybody's really clear, Chuck is going to help us kind of understand goal setting from his perspective, where, not only has he had 25 years of experience, but he's had, I think, was it 17 years at American Express and Ameriprise, yes, Financial, mm-hmm, where you personally led thousands into stellar and set stellar performance records at those, sure, organizations too. All right. So, all right, everybody. So let's go ahead. I'm going to do one real quick thing, Chuck. I'm going to just do a poll for our attendees today, so we know who's sitting in the audience, so we can kind of tailor the conversation to that.
Absolutely.
Everybody, here's your chance to play along. I'm going to launch a poll question, and it really has to do with where you're at in your real estate career, right? How long have you had a real estate license? For a lot of you, you're probably still taking classes at Kaplan right now, your licensing classes. Good for you. Congratulations for being here. How about less than 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years? And then for you grizzled veterans like me in real estate, 10 plus years. How many of you are in there? And then there's some fresh ones who they're not even sitting in licensing classes. They're just thinking about getting into real estate and getting their license. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share this poll results. Let's go ahead and end it in 3, 2, 1, 0, end. Share the results. Look at this, Chuck. We got 57% of them. So over half the people here are sitting in the real estate licensing classes. These are like fresh, become newbies. They're ready to go. They're excited about a career. Less than 3 years, 8%. 3 to 5 years, 6%. 5 to 10 years, 7%. And 10 plus years. We got 10% of you have been in the business 10 plus years. Fantastic. And you're still here, hungry for more education. Love that. All right. Let's do this. Let's jump in. This is going to be this is going to be more of a conversation, I think, everybody. We're going to have some questions. We're going to have some answers. We're going to have some stories. It's going to be about 35, 40 minutes. You're going to have a chance to participate. Go ahead and drop your questions into the chat. We have Jenna is on, Jenna Lucas, and Jamie Cash are on from Kaplan, can help answer some of those questions. Chuck and I will be watching it also. And so you have a chance to participate and ask questions. But Chuck, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in.
Sure.
For someone just starting in real estate, right, which we have a lot of people in, and we have some grizzled veterans here who are looking for some insight on this too, but how important is goal setting? What advice would you start with? What would you give them?
Well, here's what you can know. This comes from a study that Harvard did years ago. Those people who have goals do better than those people who don't. Those people who have goals and write them down do better than people who just have goals. And those people who write their goals down and share them with other people do the best. And what goal setting does for us is give us focus, right?
Got it.
And here's another stat you can know and think about. Performance in any area of life. I don't care what you do for a living, where you live, the color of your skin, male or female, it doesn't matter. Performance in any area of life is a function of three things. It's a function of talent. So talents are things we were always good at, can never remember learning. Skills are part number two. So skills are things we develop over our lifetime. And the third part of performance is decision making. So it's talent plus skills plus decision making equals performance. And of the three, decision making has twice the impact on performance than talent and skill combined. I'm not saying talent and skill don't matter.
Yeah.
They just don't matter as much as decision making. And we make about 35,000 decisions a day. So I don't know if that surprises anybody. Most of those decisions we don't think about. So how I take my coffee, brushing your teeth, getting dressed, those are all choices we make that we don't necessarily think about. And we don't have to make all 35,000 decisions a day better. But if you made one or two better choices a day, you're talking about 500, 600, 700 decisions a year, right? And so if you've ever been to any kind of a reunion, school reunion, family reunion, you may have had a situation that happened to me a few years ago when I went to my high school reunion. You're in that ballroom and there's filled with all your old friends, and somebody sees you from across the room and they go, "Hey, Toby, how are you?" And you have no idea who this guy is. And then all of a sudden you go, "Oh, that's Chuck," right? And the inside voice says, like, "What the hell happened to that guy?" Like, you don't even recognize it. That's the impact of decision making on 5, 10, 20, 30 years of your life, right? And so as it relates to goal setting, having a goal guides your decision making. It gives you focus and it helps guide our decision making. So the power of goal setting cannot be overstated. You know, we all are creatures of habit. Most of what we do every day, we do because we've always done. And so if you're trying to achieve a goal, you're trying to do something you haven't done before, which requires changes in your behavior and your decision making.
Interesting. So you just kind of set this up, and the setup is you make 38,000, 30 plus thousand decisions a day. You don't have to change all of them. You really just have to change a couple of them. And in order to understand how you're going to, achieve goals. Well, that's interesting because it's more about a consistency as opposed to some major life change.
Absolutely.
Interesting. And as far as that the reunion, I remember walking into the room and seeing that guy across the room and going, "Holy crap, he looks
right."
old." And then I realized I look the same to them. Like, what happened?
Maybe not. I mean, there's certainly people at a reunion, you go, "Well, boy, life's not been good," or they've made some poor choices. I mean, I remember at this same reunion, I was talking to one of my buddies from high school that we played baseball and basketball together, and he just gotten out of prison.
Oh, well, there you go.
So there's a difference in decision making. And I'm not saying I haven't made bad choices. I'm just saying everybody, decision making matters is my point.
Yeah, hugely impactful. Well, then to tell me this. So what are some of the common mistakes people make when goal setting? I mean, and how to avoid these kind of common mistakes that you've seen over your 25 years of experience?
Yeah, it's a great question, Toby. Probably the most important one, kind of myth that I would want to burst for people here is people think those that achieve goals are more disciplined.
Huh.
And that in fact is not true. Right? They're not more I'm sorry, they think it's about motivation. It is to a certain degree about discipline. People who achieve goals have better habits. So if you
Sure.
want to change your results in your life, goal achievement follows the law of cause and effect. I got to do something today to create a result for myself tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so what we have to know is what behavior has to change and by how much. So where a lot of people fall down in goal achievement, and I'm going to distinguish the difference between goal setting and goal
Yeah.
achievement. We're talking
Okay.
about goal achievement. Everybody can set a goal. About
Oh,
70%, you'll hear me talk about this in my TED Talk. About 70% of the population actually set goals, only 8% actually achieve them. And so we're talking about here today is goal achievement. And what goal achievers know is how much, which of my behaviors has to change and by how much in order to achieve that goal. So where a lot of people fall down is they set a goal. I want to make 250,000 a year. I want to
yeah.
sell whatever, 50 houses this year. And they stop. But what they
They
don't
they
know,
set the goal,
they
but
set the goal. And by the way, one of the greatest fears in life, in addition to public speaking, is fear of failure. So a
yeah,
lot of people don't set goals because they're afraid of failing, or they failed before because all they've done is set the goal.
right.
What goal achievers really understand is, back to my point a minute ago, is how much of their behavior has to change and which behaviors have to change. And what they do is then establish habits around those behaviors. So one of my favorite books, in addition to my own, is a book written by a guy named James Clear called Atomic Habits.
Atomic habits. Yep.
Atomic Habits by James Clear, Clear. And what he talks about is, if you want to make bad habits harder, good habits easier. So we were talking earlier, Toby, about what I like to do in terms of exercise. If I want to get healthier, I go to the grocery store when I'm full. Why do I go to the grocery store when I'm full? Because I make better choices. Back to decision making. When I go to the grocery store, I stay on the outside ring of the grocery store. Why do I stay on the outside ring of the grocery store? Because that's where all the healthy food is. If I want to start exercising, I set my alarm clock. I set out my running clothes. I make an appointment, appointment with one of my buddies to go running, because now I'm locking in this behavior and it becomes less discretionary. So it
And you've set
begins.
yourself up even. I think this is the other part is this is the part where people think it's 38,000 new decisions a day when it's really, 17 new little decisions a day
Yes, maybe
that add
five.
up. Right. Because so and this is an interesting aspect because right now, Chuck, right behind this wall, 18 steps for I counted, 18 steps from my desk is my refrigerator. That was a bad decision putting my office right here because it used
Yeah.
to be up two flights of stairs and it was 47 steps away and downstairs and upstairs and the amount of weight I gained moving my office, I didn't set myself up for success. I set myself
Mhm.
up for a bad behavior. And so I think I totally get what you're talking about. Well, let me ask this, breaking down, long-term goals, right? So because you said also something super interesting. So, I'm here at Kaplan and I got a big team of people that,
Mhm.
and as a manager, you're managing people who we're setting goals all the time.
Mhm.
And there's a big truth to the fact that there's a difference between people who set goals and people who accomplish goals.
Yes.
And it gets to kind of this core that there's a decision change, there's a priority that happens, there's a behavioral thing that happens.
Yeah.
But I also see that sometimes the goals, are almost unrealistic, given where they're at currently with the behavior and the skill set, maybe even, we talk about that a little bit too.
Mhm.
But what do you think about like people say, well, break down long-term goals into smaller steps. Does that make it more achievable for you? What's the best approach to setting a goal, but really getting to a point where you can achieve a goal?
Absolutely. Again, one of my favorite authors is a guy named Jim Collins. He wrote a book called Good to Great, Built to Last. I'm sure people have read it or heard about it. And he talks about this BHAG, BHAG, which is big, hairy, audacious goal. And a lot of people, Toby, swing for the fence, which is fine. But the problem is goal achievement isn't about hitting home runs. It's about hitting a lot of singles along the way. So to the point you made earlier, I may have a big, hairy, audacious goal, but I got to know and break it down for like what, again, it's about behavior. What behavior do I have to change and by how much incrementally to break down my goal achievement? So if I want to make $1 million a year, I just use that because I know a lot of salespeople focus on income. If I want to make $1 million a year, well, I'm not going to make that this year probably unless I get lucky. I've run a couple marathons and a half marathon. When you train for a marathon, you don't start out running 26 miles, right? I mean, you put your marathon date in there. So if I want to run a marathon on October 1st, it'll give me a plan for how much running I got to do today. And it's not 26 miles. It might be a mile. It might be half a mile, depending upon my fitness. And so the same thing applies to any goal in life is, I might not be able to do 100 push-ups, but could I do one today?
Right.
And back to this book, Atomic Habits, it's focusing on getting incrementally better every day that goal achievers focus on.
Well, so and let me just tie this back to, we have hundreds of people here that are on this webinar or going to see this webinar who are actually students. And you know who you are if you're going through the education right now. Licensing education, Chuck, if you're not completely familiar, is it's like practicing for and getting ready for a marathon, because in every state there's a licensing requirement, and it's anywhere from like 40 hours in Michigan to your fine state of Colorado is like 168 hours of licensing education. Texas is the biggest that I know of, is 180 hours of education. And they're on here now coming to this webinar, over 50% of the people here. And you have to change your behaviors if you think you're going to accomplish a goal. I can tell you, licensing education is difficult. It is one of the most, in fact, I tell everybody asks, what's your pass rate for licensing exams at your state level? I'm like, the most difficult part of getting through real estate licensing is the licensing education. It's not the state exam. It's getting through all those hours of education. And I can tell you, what you're saying resonates about it's your behavior. What are you doing every day to get through that education? You can't just jump in and run a marathon and say, I'm going to do 10 hours of licensing education today, and that solves it. We find that the students who do best are the ones that set aside a regular time. They make a decision. They dedicate themselves. They found a daily habit to get their education done. And I know this is going to play out into even a long and storied career in real estate, because like you said, you can get lucky, but the good ones in real estate, they're not lucky. They created habits, and routines. Like what do you see? What are the daily habits and routines that can help kind of ensure steady progress towards a goal?
Yeah, two things, Toby. One is you got to know what your key activities are. Key activities are things that I, meaning first person, must, being non-optional, do, being action-oriented. So key activities are things that I must do that have the biggest impact on me achieving the goal. So let's break down the example you just used. If I want to get licensed in real estate, there are some key activities around studying. There are some key activities around practice exams. There may be some key activities around talking to a specialist at Kaplan if you got questions and things you don't understand. I want to make sure that I have enough time every week to do those key activities. And one of the things we talk about at Decision Reflex is an acid test question. The acid test question is, are you willing and able to do those key activities? So if you told me I had to study 10 hours a day for the next 2 months, to get my real estate license, I would say, no, I am not willing to do that. Right?
10
If
hours.
that's what
Yeah,
it
I'm not
took.
going to burn. Yeah, right.
But if you change the goal and say, okay, if we give you to the end of the year to get your real estate license, instead of 10 hours a day, you got to study 30 minutes a day. It
Yeah.
changes. See how the goal changes the key activity. I would be willing to say, yes, I am willing to do that. That's the acid test question. If you're not willing and able to do the key activities, change the goal.
Yeah, there you go.
Change
Right?
the goal. But where people fall down is they don't know the key activities and they don't ask themselves the acid test question. Right? They don't know how many hours do I have to study to pass the exam. I mean, the nice thing about real estate, and when I was at American Express, I was in sales as well, is you're not reinventing the wheel. Right? This is not like never been done before. You're not curing cancer. So if I want to learn what it takes, and let's say you make $1 million a year, Toby,
Yeah.
what I want to do is figure out what your habits are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to copy your habits as best I can. Maybe I can't copy them to the level that you do them, but I don't need to figure this out on my own. I remember when I was in financial services years ago, I was probably 24, 25 years old. I had no money, no food, and no credit. And I remember
Bad combo.
I'm laying on my bed, and I was a financial advisor for American Express. I'm laying on my bed looking at my yellow cracked ceiling in the house that I rented with 4 other roommates. And I thought about quitting my job. And I thought, well, if I quit my job as a financial advisor, I'll have no money, no food, no credit, and no job. That's probably not a good choice. Back to decision making.
Makes
Then I
sense.
thought, well, there are people in my office making the kind of money that I want to make.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not the job that's the problem. Maybe it's me that's the problem. Maybe it's how I'm spending my time and what I'm doing. And that epiphany helped me change my whole approach to success as a financial advisor. I started paying attention to what the people were doing in my office that were making the kind of money that I wanted to make and copying their behavior and making decisions the way they would think about making decisions.
Fully applicable to this industry, Chuck. I love the way you went with this because I think about myself when I first started in real estate. It's when everybody used to go into the office and you had a lot of examples. You had a lot of examples of people who were doing it right. And you had a lot of examples of people who were doing it not so right. And
Sure.
and who were you spending your time with? Who were you trying to mimic? I mean, literally copy the behavior of
Yes.
those who were successful. And so in real estate, I'm thinking of those people that are in here and they've been in the business for 5, 6 years and they've gotten to a level and they're like, now what? How do I set bigger goals? How do I know the behavior? What are the key activities that I need to be doing? And I think the advice you just gave is look around. Uh, find those people that you can copy,
Take
beg,
them to
borrow.
lunch, take them to coffee, pick their brain. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's the relentlessness that successful people demonstrate is how, they realize, number one, if I'm not succeeding, it's something I'm doing or not doing. They own
Right.
that. They take responsibility for that. The second thing they do is they pursue with relentlessly people who are doing well and pick their brain and then copy those behaviors.
Got it. Interesting. So, just this is a topic obviously that we're talking about professional career.
Mm-hmm.
How do you? But really, this is a goal setting that can be for anything. It can be for
Anything.
relationships. It can be about. I don't know why it seems very easy and very kind of clear when I talk about like a physical goal, like activity.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know you like to bicycle. I like to bicycle. The very first time I ever did a bicycle race was a 40-mile mountain bike race up in northern Wisconsin, the Chequamegon Fat Tire Festival, and I thought I could do a 40-mile mountain bike race by riding my little mountain bike on the blacktop trails around my house for about 45 minutes. I did it like 10 times before I went to ride a 40-mile mountain bike race.
Yeah.
And I was destroyed. I mean, I was
Hmm.
literally destroyed. I had everybody and everybody, big, small, wide, short, tall, lean, everybody passed me. And at one point, 30 miles into the race, I'm on the side of the trail, completely cramped. I mean, everything from my waist down. I didn't even know whether it was possible. And some guy pulls up alongside me and says, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I can't move." He says, "You got cramps?" I'm the cramps. He says, "You got to push through it." And I'm like, "What do you mean I got to push through it?" So it was the most painful 10 miles of my life. But it was a lesson for me. It was like one of those things where there wasn't a whole lot at stake other than my own pride. But I learned that, and I swore to myself, I would never do another race
Hmm.
without being prepared. And then it was about kind of setting those goals. Like I want to do the race the next year and I want to do it 30 minutes faster. But then how am I going to get there? What is attainable? What am I willing and what am I able to do? Um, and I started writing. And it was about finding people who were doing what I thought was, you know, better bicycling than what I did, associating with them, learning from them, setting up time frames for when I would be consistent and regularly changing my decisions and habits. And but there's a piece that comes into it. There's a scare, and I did well. I cut an hour off my time the next
Hmm.
time I did it, and now I've raced that race 17 times, and I bicycle nearly every day, but it's a part of a habit forming thing. But I can tell you in the beginning, when I set that goal, there was especially when I told people what my goal was, because you said early on, there's a power in telling people what your goals are,
Yes.
right? There was this, I was a kind of afraid to tell people because I was afraid that I was going to fail, you know?
Hmm.
And so fear of failure is a real thing in goal setting and achieving, you know, what do you think? And that can hold people back. What do you think the most effective ways are? What have you seen to kind of push past the fear of setting a goal and actually, putting a stake in the ground and saying, "This is what I'm going for"? What do you think are the most effective ways to push past
Well, I
that?
think, your story illustrates a couple of them. One is successful people fail the most.
I love that. That's true.
I mean,
I
I'm just going to say the way
true.
it is. So they fail the most. I mean, so you look at somebody who's successful, and I was actually considering years ago, as I was thinking about writing a book, the title of the book was going to be "Making Mistakes Matter." So the people who are successful usually have failed the most. So it's, you've heard the cliche, failure is only permanent if you allow it to be. And so what failure enables us to do is learn. So your example of running that bike race or racing that bike race in Wisconsin, being unprepared, you learn from that.
Oh, huge
And
failure.
every time you fail,
Huge.
and I'm being careful in choosing my words here, you have the opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you do learn, that's a choice. You have the opportunity to learn from that failure. And successful people do not fear failure because they view it as a learning opportunity. And I think that's one of the keys. The second thing I think that your story illustrates is most people want to grow. Like they say, yeah, you want to grow? Absolutely. Either I want to grow personally, I want to
Mhm.
grow in my profession, in my career, but growth requires getting uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? If you always did what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten, right? So if I want to get something different in my life, back to the law of cause and effect, I got to do something different today. So you were uncomfortable, you were experiencing cramps. The guy who rode up next to you said, "Push through it, Toby. You're going to be, you drink some water, you're going to be okay." Too many people stop when they get cramps, whether it's mental cramps or physical cramps or emotional cramps. They stop. And what you have to do in order to grow is push through that. I don't mean to the point of injury, but you
Yeah.
have to be willing to get uncomfortable. So successful people do not fear failure. They view it as a learning opportunity, and they are not afraid of getting uncomfortable.
So we have, I love your point about fear. In fact, when working with my team, it's like fail early, fail often, adjust, move on, right? I mean, what are you going to do? Punt and go home?
Mhm.
No, there's work to be done. You're crafting who you are. But I know we've got people on this webinar who've been in the business for years and years and years. And they may be thinking they need to change their business.
Mhm.
The markets change, right? Interest
Yes.
rates are heading back up again now, right?
Mhm.
There's a shortage of listings still, even though listings are up. There's a shortage. There's a unit shortage in actual total available units. So we know there's a demand somewhere. There are people who are looking right now saying, I want to make a change, but this is who I am. This is who I am to the people who I am. Maybe I don't sell new construction, or maybe I've never been in land development, or maybe I'm not in rehab or remodeling, or I don't work with an investor for flipping. That fear of failure? How do you suggest to somebody who's been an expert to add an expertise or even change an expertise? Any thoughts about kind of what that looks like? How would you overcome that fear in somebody who says, I'm gonna, because your career has changed. I
As
mean,
my third career, yes.
yeah. So what do you say to people about that?
Well, I think it's a great question, and you keep using the word fear. There's two types of fear. There's the fear of failure,
Yeah.
and there's the fear of change.
Huh.
And what you have to, in your own mind, increase the fear of failure and decrease the fear of change. Increase the fear of failure. So if I don't change my behavior, what's going to happen? I won't make my income goal. If I don't make my income goal, I won't have enough money to save. I won't have enough money to cover my expenses. I mean, there's some path, again, back to decision making, that if I don't change my behavior, there is consequences to me not changing my behavior. One of my mentors used to say to people that he led years ago, he'd say, how much more research do you need to know that what you're doing isn't working?
Sorry. How
Right?
many more spreadsheets you got to look at? How
How
many
much
more
more
bank
spread,
statements?
and so then when you realize, like, the fear of not changing will lead me down a certain path that could be scarier and have greater consequences than me changing my behavior. The
Interesting.
second thing they do is think about, like, it's not like if I'm 100 pounds overweight, right? Let's just use that as an example, because everybody has some kind of health goal. You want to lower your cholesterol, you want to run a marathon, you want to lose
Yep.
weight. I don't start out trying to lose 100 pounds. I say to myself, could I lose a pound this week?
Mm.
Most people would say yes. Okay, I can lose a pound. What do I have to do to lose a pound this week? I got to go for a walk for 30 minutes a day, or whatever it is, or I got to eat less ice cream, right? And so now all of a sudden, yeah, I could do that, right? But I'm already on the path to losing 100 pounds if I lose 1 pound this week. So it might take me 100 weeks at that rate, but that's 2 years. I mean, is it worth losing a pound a week for the next 2 years to extend my life for maybe another decade or so? I mean, that's, I think, so you're increasing. If I don't lose 100 pounds, I'm going to have heart problems. I'm going to be diabetic. That's the
Yes.
increasing the fear of failure. If I don't change,
Got it.
right? But I decrease, like,
So
instead of trying to
I,
lose 100 pounds, I lose
I'm
lose.
getting my head wrapped around this a little bit, and just to maybe say it back, because I think uh, just looking at your fear,
Mhm.
because there's fear of, there's fear of lots of things. I mean, I
There's
look at
risk in life, period. Yes.
I think of like in a relationship, right? Fear of failure in my marriage. is a lot higher than my fear of change. Like, yeah, okay, I can be cleaner, I can be more,
Yeah.
love language, I can do, I can bring flowers, I can be kinder. Uh, that's easy to associate sometimes. And what you're saying is use that same principle. Your fear of failures, if it's higher than the fear of change, change isn't as hard.
The change is not as scary. That's the point.
Scary. Interesting.
It's not as scary. You say, we used to have back in American Express, we used to have annual goals for all of us. Everybody had a goal at American Express, but we would break it down to what do you have to do today? And most people will be like, oh, I don't know if I could do that for the year, but I could do it today. Okay, well, let's do it today then. Because now you're starting to establish a habit. Like you do it once, you can do it again and do it again and do it again. And so maybe you miss, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. And I think as it relates to goal achievement, you want to focus on making incremental progress every day.
And I got to tell you, it's hard sometimes. I remember when I first got into the real estate industry. I walk into the office and there's the because back when everybody went into the office, some still do that, which I think is great, and some is all remote. But back in the day, you'd walk into a real estate office and you'd have these elite big hitters that sat around the outside in their own little private offices, and then there'd be a bullpen in the middle, like where a bunch of the cubicles were all set up. And I remember walking in there, and it was hard. It was difficult to see people who have already accomplished, right? But I was sitting with people who really didn't know what they were doing because we're kind of fresh and we're all doing the same wrong stuff. But it was easy to think that those people on the outside started there.
Mm-hmm.
And what you find out after you start talking to people is they all start in the bullpen. And but the ones who make it to those big offices on the outside with the windows and their own printer in their office, that used to be the big thing. So those people, they made those little decisions, those little behavioral changes, and they realized that, it's not about losing 100 pounds in a week. It's about losing 100 pounds over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you doing every time? And they aligned themselves with other people. A lot of them were found people who they could talk to, throw ideas off, even mentors, finding those mentors who have the behaviors and the attitudes that allowed them to fail fast, learn, and move forward. Those people were the ones when they attached themselves to, they migrated into the same sort of success in the opposite. But it's hard when you're sitting on the inside to go, I want to be like that, and think you've got to change everything at once. And that's not quite the truth of it in life, in anything really.
It's knowing which behaviors have to change and by how much. And then once I know that, the acid test question is, am I willing to do that? If the answer is no, what I have is a dream. If the answer is yes, then I have a goal. So the difference between dreams and goals are, am I willing and able to do what it takes? And if the answer, again, back to the question, if the answer is no, I lower the goal.
Got it. Yeah.
Until I can say, yes, I'm willing and able to do what it takes. So back to I can't do 100 push-ups, but I can do one. I'll do one. I can't lose 100 pounds, but I can lose 1 pound this week. Let's do that. That's what successful people do.
Super interesting what you just said. I just want to back up for one quick little reverse the tape here a second. The difference between dreams and goals are that goals are the things that you're willing and able to accomplish.
The behaviors you're willing and able to demonstrate. Am I willing to go to the gym 3 hours a day, 7 days a week? No, that's a dream. Like I used to have a dream one day of climbing Mount Everest until I read a book called Into Thin Air by John Krakauer years ago. And I read that book and I was like, there's no way I'm ever climbing Mount Everest. No way. Doesn't pass the acid test. Now, running a marathon, that was intimidating. I was scared. I wasn't sure I could do it, right? But I broke down a game plan so that the first week, it was like maybe running a couple miles a day, 2 or 3 times that week. I could do that. And then you start to build on it week after week after week so that you're running 20, 25 miles.
Perfect. So even Alyssa on here in the chat says, we can feel overwhelmed too. That can bring fatigue. So this overwhelmed, like I'm working and I'm just not getting ahead. I'm not advancing. I'm feeling like
Hmm.
I'm overwhelmed, which, there is a thing to accomplishing goals that helps build momentum, setting some easy goals. I call it
Yeah.
wins. We talk about it with in my household. I talk about at work. Set some wins, get some momentum. Uh, but there is a time when you can have this aspiration, this goal that all of a sudden it becomes overwhelming because maybe you don't feel like you're progressing, or it slows, right, or challenges arise. What would you say to somebody? How do you keep them to stay motivated, right? Keep moving forward. What's your advice?
I'm sorry, you broke up. How to stay motivated?
Yeah, and when progress slows or challenges arise, how
Yeah.
can someone stay motivated or keep moving forward?
I think the key is making sure you got the right habits. So people who keep moving forward don't rely on motivation. Number
Oh,
one, they don't. Motivation at best shows up, and at worst, it doesn't show up at all. So what you have to rely on are your habits. That's
yeah,
my point. It's not about motivation. People who are successful at goal achievement have great habits. And if the way you know if you have a great habit is, am I getting the results? If you're not getting the results, it's the definition of insanity.
oh, right.
You keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. You're the crazy person. Successful people examine their habits. They're maniacal about tracking how they spend their time. So in real estate, how many people did I talk to? How many listings do I have? How many, whatever the key activities are in real estate, you track those. And if
Yeah,
you're not getting the results you think you should be getting, you change your behavior. And if you're not sure which behavior to change, you talk to somebody who's successful or has success that you have, and you copy their habits.
right on. Right on. Well, and I think about that. And I think about the most successful real estate people, which I'm sure we have people on here that do this. These are the people who have ingrained one habit that, if I could give one habit, it is they talk to people every day about real estate. Every day. And
Mm-hmm.
it's 4, 5, 10 people a day they talk to about real estate.
Mm-hmm.
What are your goals? How's your house working? Do you have any friends or neighbors that are looking to move into that? Is there a house for sale by you that you'd like to have a friend or neighbor I could bring in there and show them?
Right.
Have you seen the new development down the road happening? I just saw I was coming through city council. You're talking about real estate. If there was one habit that could lead to success in real estate, and I would just look for some in the chat. If you're a wise and grizzled veteran and you found success, how true is my statement right now about talking to, not just texting somebody, not just emailing somebody, even though that's good. That's like a one-way a two-way conversation about real estate. What do you think the behavior that can generate a business that can support just about any lifestyle you want? Um, as a habit. I mean, I just love to see it in the chat if somebody has a thought or has a different idea of what they think the number one habit is. I would love to see that. I see this now. Social media is a great tool out. Maybe they're posting social media, you're getting your name out there, people are being
Mm-hmm.
aware of it. But but in order to do that, right, in order to have that conversation, Chuck, there's a couple things you got to do to get to that point, right? These little decisions
Right.
that move
Well,
along.
real estate is it's like any other business. If you own a restaurant, you're a dentist, you sell real estate, it doesn't matter. If you want to sell a certain number of houses to make a certain income, it's a funnel. I got to have more listings than I have houses sold, because not every listing I have is going to be a sale.
Right.
To get a certain number of listings, I got to have a certain number of prospects. To have a certain number of prospects, I got to talk to a certain number of people. All of that is an increasing number. And you mentioned the changing dynamics in the real estate market these days. Those ratios are changing. You may have to put more people in your sales funnel because there's less homes in the market, there's higher interest rates. So that means I have to do more to get people into that funnel, to have more listings, to have the sales that I want. That's what successful people do, is they understand the market's changed. So what I can control is how many people I put into that funnel, which is what you're talking about, Toby. I start by talking to people. Some of those people will say, hey, Toby, I need your help, or I got a friend, or I got a family member. But that's how you control what goes into that funnel, is your own behavior.
Yeah, right on. Right on. Right. And your decision, did you decide that from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock every morning, I'm going to make so many calls? All right. Have you set yourself up for success? Let's say you don't like calls. Are you setting yourself up for success to say, I'm going to take 5 people out to coffee this week. I'm going to make an appointment with a friend to sit down and have
People
coffee.
don't answer their phones anymore, but they will go to coffee.
Right? Are you
Right?
are you part of a group of people who meets regularly? I mean, I'll tell you right now that, I bicycle probably 4 days a week with 3 different groups of people, and we almost always have a coffee afterwards. Now I've organized a situation where I really enjoy it, and I have the opportunity to be that expert and to talk to people about real estate. Oh, that home came up for sale next to you. But I've orchestrated, a situation where I enjoy it. I've set up the parameters by making decisions to do certain things that allow me to be very social about who I am and what I do. And I find that is one of those things that you say about behaviors. How do you set up success? It's not any one decision. It's a bunch of little things. Right? It's
Exactly
not being 18 steps from your refrigerator. It's being 47 steps upstairs.
Well, you're getting your refrigerator harder. Back to the point, you make good habits easier, bad habits harder.
Right on.
So, I love Oreos. If I go to the grocery store full, I'm less likely to buy Oreos. So that at 11 o'clock at night, when I think about eating Oreos, I don't have them. Right? That's the point.
Don't put them in the cupboard, right? But they don't come in the cupboard because you decided to eat before you go to the grocery store, so you didn't make that impulse purchase, right? You set yourself up. What do you think? If I had to say, let's go with 3 key points, right, for our audience. What should they take away from today's session? Can you boil it down to like 3 key points for everybody who's looking at and hitting your
set goals, write them down, and share them with other people? That's number 1, because people achieve their goals, but they don't achieve them alone. So share your goals with people who have a vested interest in helping you achieve them, not people who are going to kick your butt or make you feel bad. Number 1. Number 2, get real clear on the key activities that are necessary to achieve your goal. If you don't know them, talk to somebody who has achieved that goal. And
that mentor, that example, those people.
Copy their key activities.
Right.
And the third thing is focus on progress, not perfection. Get a little bit better every single day, and do not beat yourself up if it doesn't work out, because most people that are successful have failed more than anybody else.
Over and over and over again. But they get up, they adjust, move forward, right? It's not perfection, it's movement, and moving towards your goal. Well, I tell you what, this is a conversation, obviously, if they can take an entire lifetime. But Chuck, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming and being a part of our Real Experts series. I also want to open it up. If you have any questions, I know we're coming up on our time here, but if you have any questions, everybody, we have a couple minutes just to answer a couple quick questions in the chats. Also, if you want to continue the conversation, you can go to the Kaplan community that we have. The Kaplan community is out there. I think Jamie Cash posted it in the chat. Grab that, click on it. We have hundreds of people who participate in those conversations online. A lot of them are industry experts. And then also, I believe that Jamie Cash also posted in there, Chuck, your guys' web address where people can contact your team if they want to further a conversation with you.
Happy to help. You can
Business.
set up a free 30-minute discovery call with somebody on my team,
Got it.
and we can certainly explore how we might be able to help you further.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. I just want to say thank you again. Thank you, everybody. Chuck, thank you. Appreciate you and your goal setting expertise for our people. Let me see here. We're going to do one thing. How did you overcome fear of going to others when were a financial advisor, or what did you ask them to start to learn what you needed to? We had a very specific.
It's a great question. It goes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago. I knew if I did not change my behavior, I was going to fail. I mean, you can't get much worse than no money, no food, and no credit.
Yeah.
Right. So the fear of failure was much greater for me than the fear of change. So it wasn't the absence of fear.
Yeah.
It was being very clear on if I did not change, I was going to fail, and I did not want to fail out of the career that I loved.
Yeah.
That then didn't eliminate the fear of talking to other people, but it put it into perspective.
Yeah. Pick your poison. I'd pick the one that yeah.
Exactly.
Chuck, we're going to go ahead and end it here. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for participating. We appreciate you. Take care.